Hey folks, it's Ray at Rainmaker.com here, and today I've got the Garmin Enduro GPS watch in-depth review. Now this video is divided up in a couple different sections. I've got a bunch of the 9 new things to know up front, and then I've got a bit of a walkthrough of the watch itself, and then from there I go into some of the accuracy testing, and after that we'll talk about whether or not you want to buy the watch. You can go ahead and use the YouTube chapters along the bottom right there to kind of get your way through the video if you want to. The first thing to know is the price. It is not cheap. It's $7.99 for the base stainless steel model right here, or $8.99 for the titanium coated one that I have on my wrist right there. The exact same features on both of them, so they're identical other than just the case and shell itself. Now the main difference between these two is really the weight. So the titanium here at 61 grams, sorry having to like get the light off this, versus the stainless steel comes in at 71 grams. There we go right there. So again, you're just paying more for a lighter watch. It's got this new nylon strap on it. It's pretty nice. It hasn't got stinky yet, which is good. Okay, so next up on the list, we have the battery claims. And they start off with like, oh, that's impressive. And they move up to, holy crap, are you kidding me? And just wait through this whole section. It's pretty insane. So the first thing though is this edition, well, both editions have solar. Just like the Fenix 6 solar editions had it, and similar to the Garmin Instinct editions. And if we look at one of these watches, you'll see there's basically 2 solar panels. The first one is around this outside edge. Let me find something that I probably should use to show you this. So this pokey thing. And there's a little band right there. It's like a reddish color band right in the outside edge inside of that yellowish neon color. That level there is 100% photovoltaic level, meaning it's capturing effectively 100% of the sun's goodness that hits it and turning that into solar energy. But it's really small. It's very, very thin. Underneath the entire display, underneath the glass, the power glass as Garmin calls it, is another solar panel that stretches the entire width, and that has 10% photovoltaic level, meaning it's only capturing 10% of the sun's goodness that hits it. So between those two, you get more solar energy, but the goal here with Garmin's watches isn't to really like have forever power. Instead, it's to go ahead and provide a little bit of an added buffer on top of your existing battery life. And so let's talk about those battery life numbers, because they're impressive. I got to pull up my stats here. So in smartwatch mode, the Enduro gets 50 days of smartwatch, up to 65 days with solar power. And when it says with solar power, that means you're getting 3 hours per day of moderately sunny conditions. 50,000 lux to be precise. A full bright sunny day is 110,000 lux. So we're not talking like Sahara Desert sun, but it's still some sun. Anyways, in GPS workout mode, it's up to 70 hours or 80 hours with solar. Max battery mode is 200 hours on the battery and 300 hours of solar. And so in that mode, they turn down some of the sensors. They turn off optical heart rate. They turn off connecting to other sensors, and it reduces the recording rate a little bit as well. But still, 300 hours is insane. And then you've got Expedition GPS mode, which goes up to 95 days of GPS track points, but you're not really going to use that. And then finally, last but not least, there's Battery Saver Watch mode, which starts off at 130 days and goes up to 1 year with solar power. Basically just using the power of this to keep it in a very basic watch mode, and that's it. I mean, those are impressive stats. But what's more impressive is it actually holds true. So I've been testing this and going out and doing longer activities and seeing what the battery burn rates are, because the burn rates are actually recorded into the files, and so I can look at that. And so a couple things to start off with. First is a simple run I did here, and it burned at 1.2% per hour, meaning I have 83 hours of runtime. And I saw this same burn rate on a couple other runs as well, so I'm seeing that consistency there. And that's with optical heart rate enabled, GPS plus GLONASS, and just doing intervals out on a normal day, with it mostly underneath my coat because it's winter here. Next though, what happens if you start navigating? So in that case, I've loaded a course onto it, and for last night's run, I was at 1.89% battery burn rate, or basically a 52-hour battery life. So it's below the 70 hours, but you're adding more layers to it. It was nighttime, so the backlight was on and off a lunch. I was navigating the entire time on the course page. All those things impact the battery life. But if we go the other direction, for a 5-hour ride I did, I went ahead and I connected a chest strap to it. In that case, I had 1.07% battery burn rate, or 93 hours of battery time estimated. That's astounding for a GPS watch in a non-optimized configuration. Like, there's way more I could do to that to get that a bit more optimized and get more battery life out of it. So that got me kind of thinking, like, what was different about this? And I asked Garmin, I said, is this really just a Fenix 6 with a bigger battery in it? Or is there something a little bit different under the covers? And they said, I quote, "The Enduro is built on a different platform and larger battery. Combined, these are the features that lead to a longer battery life." Meaning it's not just a bigger battery. There's fundamental changes in this system that make it different than a Fenix 6. Maybe features that kind of hint at what's to come for the rest of the year. We'll have to see. Speaking of things that are useful to know, if you go ahead and whack that like button at the bottom there right now, it really helps out this video and the channel quite a bit, and I definitely appreciate it. Next up, we've got the new ultra rest timers. What the ultra rest timer does is it basically creates a marker in your file when you're resting, ideally like an aid station or something like that, so you can figure out later on the portions of the run that you're resting and sitting there kind of static versus the portions that you're running. And this is only offered in the new ultra run mode, but the key thing is the rest timer isn't stopping the GPS. That's a fundamental difference between pressing the stop or pause button and the rest timer. The rest timer is almost like taking a lap. In fact, it is taking a lap if you set it there. There's 3 settings for the rest timer. If we look at it, the lap key becomes that rest timer. You can do just normal laps like usual. You can do lap plus rest or rest only. Once you touch that timer, it will turn the screen black, so it'll invert the screen basically, and it shows your amount of rest time right now and then the overall timer. When you hit the lap key again, it goes back into the regular workout mode. You can still access all of your existing data pages though in the rest timer mode. And again, it's no big deal if you forgot to like restart it as you start running again. The data doesn't stop in any way, shape, or form. Oh, and that ultra run rest timer is coming to the 745, 945, Fenix 6, and Mark series. Fenix 6 and Mark today, and the other watches here shortly as well. Next is the new ClimbPro Descents option. Now, if you're not familiar with ClimbPro, what it basically does is it takes a climb that you have and a day's worth of course, and it divides it up into smaller climbs. So if you think about a typical mountain hike, it's not just usually from the base of the mountain straight to the top with complete static gradient the entire time. Usually you go up for a bit, you may go down slightly or flatten out, then you go back up again. So ClimbPro basically divides it up into different sections. The problem is up until now, ClimbPro didn't account for eventually going back down again. It was all about getting to the top, but getting back down, it was like, not my problem. Now it does. So you can see this here if I go into view climbs when I load up a course. So you have to predefine these courses ahead of time. View climbs, and you'll see right there, there is total descents, but we get the first time, total climbs right there. So 3,500 feet of climbing for this route right there. And then climb number 2. And then here's my first descent. So it's only 0.16 miles. I go down 89 feet, not very much, but average gradient is 11%. And then go back up again, another climb, average gradient 17%, of 1,300 feet basically. And then when you're out on the climb itself, whether it's descending or ascending, ClimbPro will show you where you are on the climb, and then show your amount of ascent required left, the ascent rate, the distance left, all the stats. I find it like probably one of the best Garmin features out there, both cycling and running, especially if I'm in the mountains. This feature is too coming to the 945 Mark and Fenix 6 here today, and then shortly for the 945. Now the next new feature is ClimbPro Alerts. So what that does is it basically alerts you as you start a climb or as you approach a climb. So you go into configure your alerts here. So go down into the settings and then into ClimbPro and then down to alert. And here I can choose at the start of a climb to alert me, or the distance prior to a climb. So I can say a quarter mile prior to the climb, alert me. And the reason you may want that, and that's both ascending and descending, is if you wanted to perhaps do nutrition at a certain time before you started going up or down, you could do that right then and there. This feature is also coming to the 945 Mark and Fenix 6 as well. Next is the new VO2 Max updates for trail running and ultra running mode. Now, historically, Garmin watches would underreport your VO2 Max. And that was because it wouldn't really account for the intensity required to get around like trail obstacles and trail conditions that would elevate your heart rate. So you'd be going slower than you normally would out on the road, and it would kind of think that you're less fit than you are because your heart rate is higher. So this new algorithm accounts for that, and it looks at the accelerometer data of the watch itself to figure out what's going on and tries to get a more accurate picture of it. Now you can still turn off the VO2 max settings for trail run and ultra run, and the reason you might want to do that is if you're carrying a really heavy pack. So for example, last summer, or anytime I go to the Alps, I'm often carrying a bunch of camera gear with me. So if I'm doing a trail run with like a 25-pound pack of camera gear and drones and stuff, that's going to inflate my heart rate and skew my VO2 max numbers. And if my VO2 max numbers are skewed, it's going to skew my training status numbers, which in turn skews my recovery numbers. So you can turn that off if you want to. There's a new setting there called Record VO2 Max. That is coming to the 245, 745, 945, Fenix 6, and Mark series watches as well. Got all that? Now, you're probably wondering to yourself, what is the difference between this and the Fenix 6? After all, they're essentially the same price. And in fact, in some ways, this is more expensive than the base Fenix 6. And the key thing to understand is that this is effectively a base Fenix 6 without the Fenix 6 Pro features, despite having a Pro price tag. So by that, you're not getting music, you're not getting Wi-Fi, you're not getting maps. So there's no like trend line stuff there or heat map routing, that's not on there. It's just purely breadcrumb trails. You're also not getting Pace Pro on the fly. You can get Pace Pro on this, to be super clear, you'll get Pace Pro, but you have to configure the course ahead of time on this versus be on a route with the Fenix 6 Pro on the fly using the mapping data there. The same is true for ClimbPro. It's on the unit, as I showed earlier, but you have to go ahead and load the course ahead of time versus on a Fenix 6 Pro or a Mark Series or 945. You can have the data there and just route to somewhere because it has all the map data on itself. So effectively, you're paying more for less features than a Fenix 6 or a 945. But what you are getting is way longer battery life. So you gotta kind of decide, do you want crazy battery life or do you want a lot of features? And that'll be a different choice for each person. Okay, moving on to a quick size comparison to other watches out there, notably like the Fenix 6 series. This right here is a Fenix 6X Pro Solar. So Garmin's, one of their top line watches outside the Mark series, and the shells are identical. It's the exact same external shell, the same width, all the same stuff, just inside here is a bigger battery than previously. And it's also that more optimized platform that we talked about in the past. If you compare that to something like the Coros Vertex right here, you can see that it's certainly a bigger watch than the Coros Vertex. There's no doubt about that. About the same width though, really not much difference in width there. If I jump over to, what do we got here? The Polar Grit X, which is a little bit bigger, I think, than the Polar Vantage V2. You can see it's definitely a bigger watch than that as well. Okay, so let me just very quickly show two slides comparing it against basically the top of the line watches from all the other vendors out there in this segment for GPS battery recording times. This full fidelity GPS recording rate with optical heart rate enabled. You can see those numbers there. And then the second one here is showing it at the highest GPS recording rate they offer. That's not like just one track point a day. So as long as you're talking at least a couple track points or so every minute, that's the recording rates here. And this is where you start to really see the difference between this watch and all the other watches out there. Okay, so with that all set, let me just do a super quick tour of what this looks like from a user interface standpoint. I'm gonna back out of here, there we go. This is the watch face itself. You can see the buttons on the side. There are 3 on this side, 2 on this side. There is no touchscreen on this. So here on the front, you've got your solar charging status. I'm gonna flip over to some B-roll when it was outside and sunny, and you can see what that looks like with the sun hitting that and using this watch outside on a sunny day over the course of the day. So in this case, I was able to get a bit more solar energy out of it. Going on down, I've got the widgets there. So you can see my solar intensity, training status. I've got this new advanced sleep metrics widget that is offered on Enduro. That's something that Garmin started rolling on at Fenix 6, and then it stalled a bit on other watches. Garmin said that's about to resume on the other watches, so it's there. And then other widgets like weather and sunset and compass and cycling and all this sort of glanceable stuff that you would expect from the past. If I go back though, I can tap this upper right button right there, and this gets into my sport profiles. There's like 40 or 50 sport profiles, and most of them have pretty custom data to it. But the new one here really is this new ultra running mode. So when I tap this goes into the ultra run mode, and at first this is basically just like a run mode, except it's got the rest timers we talked about earlier, and it's got the ability to go ahead and turn off the VO2 max if you want to. So if I go on the left hand side right there and I hold this down, I can go and I can choose the ultra run settings. So you can see right there, I go down to, there's my ClimbPro options, including the ability to see the descents on or off. If I go down even further, you'll see the lap key. There's my rest and lap timer options right there. And then down again, you can see, here we go, record VO2 max. And then if I had a course setup, so I go to navigation and courses and choose this one right there and do course, then it loads that particular course up. Once I'm ready to go, I go ahead and I just simply hit the start button right there, and then I'm off and running, quite literally. When I want to do the lap timer, I just simply hit this lower right-hand button to make a lap timer. In this case, it makes both the lap as well as the rest timer. So you can see right there, there is the rest timer and my total timer. And again, I can change it so I don't also set the lap if you don't want. And you'll see as I go down through these menus, everything's flipped to the black screen as opposed to the white screen. It's sort of the visual cue that you're in the rest timer mode, but it's still recording behind the scenes. You can see this, in fact, if you look up here, your lap time is still going. And then when I'm ready to go again, just go back here to any screen you want, in fact, and hit the lap button down the bottom right. And this will then go back into regular run mode. And you'll see the screens will now flip into that kind of white background option as well. So there we go, like this. You can see they're all white again. Everything else, though, is just a Fenix 6 that you know and love from a feature standpoint. It's identical. Okay, so with that, let's dive into a bit of the accuracy over the desk. Okay, so all this data is in my full written review, so I'm just going to quickly blow through this, but you can go ahead and dive into all this link down below if you want to see it. A couple different runs. First, a city run, which is sometimes more difficult than actually trail runs, and in this case, it's pretty good. There's a little bit of kind of divergence at the beginning there, but then all of the units get in line. This is compared against a Coros Vertex,
X, a Polar Grid X, a Garmin Forerunner 745. As I get into the heart of the city, all the units are pretty much spot on. From a heart rate standpoint, it's pretty good on this one. One or two minor areas where I would quibble with it, but not bad. If I then look at a interval workout I did a couple days later, a bunch of 800s, it was basically perfect on the 800s, but then struggled slightly on a couple of the 200-meter sprints. The Coros Vertex also struggled here as well, so not necessarily unusual for those very short kind of 30 or so second sprints. Looking at a track workout with the new track workout mode, no problems there at all. The same for an impromptu track workout around a stadium, where I just did a normal GPS against the side of the stadium. And then we head out into the trails. And so this one I have with me the Polar Grid X and the Coros Vertex, as well as a 945. And at a high level, things look pretty good. But as I got deeper into the woods, it kind of varied as to which one was correct. They all sort of messed up a little bit, and they all were spot on a little bit for the first like half an hour. And then as I got longer into the run, they all like converged and were basically spotless for the rest of the run. And again, in the review, I dive into all these data sets, and you can pull them all up for cycling and some other running workouts as well.
Okay, so there you go, a complete look at the new Garmin Enduro watch. And here's the thing. This is all about the battery. All about the battery and whether or not you want the extra battery for the extra costs and less features. And it's a choice you have to make. For me personally, I wouldn't necessarily buy this watch because I don't have any desire whatsoever to run for 70 hours. And the act of charging isn't really that big of a deal for me. I mean, look, I run with like 5 watches on every single run. So charging is the least of my problems in the grand scheme of things. And also for me, I really do like the maps. And since this does not have maps on it, when I'm out trail running, especially in the mountains, I find the map super useful to keep me like on course and going, to be able to see what should be water or a stream or a lake or different, terrain features. That's something that isn't on this watch. And I think for the ultra crowd, unless you really absolutely positively need that extra battery life, I'd probably lean towards a Fenix 6 Pro or a 945 if you can make it work from a battery life standpoint. With that, hope you found this interesting. If so, simply whack that like button at the bottom there or hit subscribe for plenty more sports technology goodness. With that, have a good one.